It's 8 o'clock. Good evening, members. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this meeting of District Development Management Committee. We will now read the webcasting announcement. Gary, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to remind everyone present that this hybrid meeting will be broadcast live to the internet and will be capable of repeated viewing or other such use by third parties. Therefore, by participating in this meeting, you are consenting to being filmed and to the possible use of those images and sound recordings for webcasting and/or training purposes. If any public speakers on Microsoft Teams do not wish to have their image captured, they should ensure that their video setting throughout the meeting is turned off and set to audio only. Please also be aware that if technical difficulties interrupt the meeting that cannot be overcome, the Chairman may need to adjourn the meeting. Finally, members are reminded to activate their microphones before speaking and switch them off when they have finished. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Gary. For the purposes of the webcast, we'll do the introductions. My name is Councillor Paul Kesker and I am Chairman this evening. To my right is Councillor Tim Matthews, who is the Vice Chairman. To his right is Gary Woodall from Democratic Services, and to my left is Graham Courtney, a Senior Planning Officer who will be taking us through the application. Number 2 is advice for public and speakers. Gary, I've no doubt that's been done.
Yes, Chairman, the public speakers were advised when they're registered, and I've also quickly reminded them this evening of their 3-minute limit.
Thank you very much. Number 3 is apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chairman. We have apologies tonight from Councillors Helen Kane, Richard Morgan and Chris Pond.
Thank you. Number 4 is substitute members.
Thank you, Chairman. Tonight we have Councillor John Phillip substituting for Councillor Richard Morgan, and we have Councillor Ray Bolcombe substituting for Councillor Helen Kane.
Thank you. Number 5, members' declarations of interest. Does anyone have any declarations of interest? Councillor Phillip.
Chairman, yes, I was on Plans East when this came forward, and I just make the same declaration that the applicant is known to me.
But you're not intending to withdraw?
I'm not intending to withdraw. Okay. It would be a bit strange to substitute a one-item agenda. No, the applicant's known to me. We haven't talked since this has been at Plans East. We haven't talked about this at all.
Okay, that's fine. Councillor Burrows?
Exactly the same.
Okay, thank you very much. Noted. Members, number 6, the minutes, pages 6 to 8 of the agenda. Can I take it that they are a true record and you're happy for me to sign them? Thank you. I do hope there's nothing under the next item, but site visits. No one is requesting a site visit. Okay, in which case we're on to the one application tonight, and that is EPF 0022/23, 34 Crows Road, Epping, CM16 5DE, pages 9 to 21 of your agenda. And Graham, if you would take us through the application, please.
No problem. Thank you, Chairman. So this site relates to number 34 Crows Road, and planning consent is being sought for the demolition of the existing house and erection of a pair of semi-detached dwellings. The application was referred up from East Committee with no recommendation from members. The application is recommended approval by officers, subject to conditions and a legal agreement. Here we have some photographs of the property in question, this being the front. There is a detached garage with accommodation above. That is on the boundary with number 32. This is a photo montage of the proposed scheme. As you can see, it would be a pair of fairly traditional semi-detached houses. This is a block plan showing the proposal. Sorry, it's not wonderfully clear on here. So this here shows the existing building. And then the hatched area to the rear is the new built form. This rear section here would be single storey, and you can see how this relates to the existing two-storey garage, which would obviously be removed. You can also see how it relates to the neighbours. The built form would not extend significantly beyond either neighbour, and it would be stepped off the boundaries by 1.1 metres, 1.1 metre here and 1.5 metres here. This shows the internal layout. Each of the proposed properties would have 4 bedrooms. This shows the elevations of the proposal. The flank windows would be obscure glazed, and this would be controlled by condition. This shows the existing and proposed street scene. As you can see, the topography of the site rises to number 32. The proposal would sit in a similar position as existing. The overall height of the building would be the same as existing. At East Committee, there was much discussion around bats and the potential loss of habitat through this development. The applicant has submitted a bat survey that was assessed by the Council's ecology consultants. Detailed comments have been returned with a number of recommendations that have been included in the suggested conditions. In addition to the planning conditions, bats, as you're probably aware, are protected under environmental legislation, which obviously has its own powers to prosecute. Councillor Phillip previously highlighted a developer that was fined almost £15,000 in October 2023 due to harm to bats. I did have a little look myself, and there were also a couple of housing developers in Wales that were fined in 2022 due to similar impacts on bats. The Bat Conservation Trust has also published that on average there have been around 150 bat-related police incidents reported per year throughout the last 10 years. Whilst we appreciate the concerns around the bats, the applicants have dealt with this, the Council's consultants are not objecting, and planning conditions have been suggested. This is as far as planning can go with this matter. Overall, the development would be acceptable, as it would not result in harm to the neighbours' amenities. It includes off-street parking and suitable amenity for future occupants. There would be no harm to the character and appearance of the street scene, and therefore the application is recommended for approval subject to conditions and a legal agreement to secure appropriate SAC mitigation measures. Thank you.
Thank you, Graham. We have 2 speakers tonight. Our first speaker is Mr. Robert Lambert, who is an objector in person. You have 3 minutes, if you could remember to switch on and switch off your microphone. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm representing the residents of Crows Road from numbers 28 down, who are above me in the gallery. And they're here tonight and they all object alongside me. Epping Society has also objected. You have all been sent a detailed objection with photographic evidence outlining anomalies, misleading pictures, discrepancies in measurements and loss of residential amenities within the proposed development plan by the residents of Crows Road, and we hope that you will all read and study these before casting a vote. We are deeply concerned and would like to address that the Council has been misled in a number of ways. Pictures have been taken by the developer with misleading camera angles, omitting the street scene entirely. These include the street trees, the verge, the curbs, the lie of the land, and the surrounding houses. The fact that the planning officer hasn't addressed this, as well as massive inaccuracies within their report, shows that there has been no site visit, and the planning officer is not able to make a recommendation based on facts, but based off of false imagery from the developer alone. In a slide shown in the previous meeting that has actually gone missing in this one, it stated that a house that was directly opposite is a semi-detached house. This is completely untrue. The house shown is number 28, or it was number 28, which is another semi-detached house that is further up the road. I actually live directly opposite, and we are a detached house, as is the 15 houses surrounding us, which are either detached or bungalows. To demolish number 34 and replace with 2 large semi-detached houses would be massive overdevelopment of the street, where number 34 falls directly in the middle. Allowing this to go forward would set a dangerous precedent for the remaining houses in this section of the road, which could not be undone once started. We are also concerned with the sheer size of the proposed development. As you can see from those graphs, it would be double the size of what the current property is. It would be enormous and not keeping with the street scene at all, as all the houses in Crows Road have either garages, front gardens, verges, walls, trees out the front of the properties. The proposed plans of putting 2 houses in the plot going all the way up to the boundaries on both sides, leaving no gap from number 32 and number 36, which is a chalet bungalow, would be grossly overlooked and raise a huge loss of residential amenities, especially with the flank windows on ground floors. It is not good enough to be obscured or fixed, as the previous meeting confirmed that these changes could be made by a new resident. They need to be removed completely. The development would be 2.4 metres beyond number 32, and we have provided photographic evidence in the documents that you have been sent. We are also concerned about the bats that are roosting in number 34. All 17 species of bats found in Britain are protected by law, and it is a criminal offence to destroy their roosts or relocate them. We know that there have been a colony of bats living in this garage for well over 30 years. We have contacted and made the Bat Conservation Trust aware of this matter, and they have urged that multiple surveys need to be carried out at different times of the year to get a true representation of the number of bats that are actually in the colony, as one survey does not represent a true mean. We feel it would be unjust for the Council to vote on this proposed development this evening based under all these false and misleading pretences.
And I'll ask you to wind up now, please. You've had your 3 minutes.
Thank you. Just due to these issues, we wish that the committee is not in a position to be able to vote upon this fairly, as the planning application should be refused. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our second speaker is Geoffrey Shaw, who is the applicant's agent, and he is speaking in person.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd just like to make 2 points this evening, if I may. The first is regarding bats. At the previous Planning Committee East meeting, a number of councillors openly stated that they had no previous experience of the issue and didn't know the procedure. For clarity, I'd like to reinforce what the planning officers have said. Evidence of bats on a property is not a planning issue. The evidence of bats on a property is not a planning issue. All species of bats are protected under common law. And under the law, if we wish to relocate the bats, we have to get a mitigation licence from Natural England. Depending upon the number of bats and the species, depends upon whether they will grant a licence, and they may or may not grant a licence. If they do grant a licence, they will probably require us to employ a specialist batman to be present on site whilst we remove individually the tiles of the roof of the garage, and if they find a bat, they catch that bat and then move it to a specialist centre in Essex for rehousing. The second point I'd like to make is regarding the planning issues, and as reported by the planning officer, we have addressed all of the planning officer concerns, and the planning officers have recommended the scheme for approval. However, I would just like to clear up a couple of the queries made by councillors at the previous meeting. One, they discussed at quite length the overlooking of kitchen windows. I've produced the revised drawing showing PL9, showing the relationship of the kitchen windows with the boundary, and it's very clear from that drawing that there is absolutely no overlooking. The second point at the Planning Committee East meeting that was discussed at length was the possibility of it being overdevelopment. There are many houses in the locality that are built right up to the boundary of their sites. In fact, both neighbours, number 34 and number 36 and number 32, have one of their buildings right up against the boundary. The existing property is 800 millimetres from number 36. We propose to increase that. The proposal is for 1.1 metres. On the other side, up against number 32, the existing two-storey garage is just 300 millimetres from the boundary. The proposal is to make the existing houses 1.1 metres from the boundary. The ridge heights are exactly the same. The roof level is exactly the same. So I believe there is no argument that it is possibly overdevelopment. Regarding comments from the objector there, all of the dimensions on the drawings are absolutely accurate. I've been producing drawings for 50 years now, and I can assure you they are accurate. And the semi-detached houses are identical to those other semi-detached houses in the street. So the street scene, so they will fit seamlessly into the street scene.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
You have had your 3 minutes, so thank you.
Sorry.
If you could turn your microphone off.
Sorry.
Thank you very much. Right. If I could just say the objector did raise a number of points about the application, including discrepancies in the plan, misleading photographs and inaccuracies in the report by the planning officers, which I would like to address first, because that's something which I would take seriously and I would find very unusual. So, Mr. Courtney, perhaps you could.
Well, all I can say is that I know this issue was raised at East Committee. Obviously, we had the case officer presenting at East Committee, and she did confirm that she had checked the plans. She did confirm that she was, she was happy that the plans were accurate. Obviously, we've had the agent here stating that they are accurate. Obviously, he's putting his professional integrity on the line here, I guess, because if it turns out they build not in accordance to the plans, then obviously that doesn't look good on him. I've certainly personally not seen. I haven't measured the site myself. Obviously, I'm just presenting this to yourselves. But the case officer did say she has checked. And she is happy with that. I think the photographs, we can't control what photographs are submitted by the applicant. I do accept that I believe there was a photograph of number 20, I think it's 2628, if I remember rightly, Crows Road, and it was referred to as being opposite, and it is an opposite. It is further down the road, and that is why it's been taken out, because that wasn't correct. So I didn't want to repeat the mistake there, but it is down Crows Road. It is a few doors down. There are obviously other semi-detached houses down Crows Road. And then I think the only other potential issue was just with the photo montage that I did show, which I'm happy to put back up. Obviously, that doesn't show things like the street trees, things like that. That's not uncommon. Obviously, a photo montage is there as a sort of a bit of a visual guide. It isn't a plan that we would use or rely on. It isn't something that we would enforce against. It isn't suggesting those trees aren't going to be there. Certainly, there's a tree report, and we would expect they're street trees. You can't just remove them. We would expect they would be there, but often they are removed from things like photo montages, because otherwise you won't see the building. So, yeah.
I think it might be useful to have the elevation, not the photographic one, the actual plans application up on the screen, if that would be possible. The one that showed the roof levels and so on. Anyway, members, the proposal from the Planning Department is to approve with conditions. Who would like to start? Councillor Amos.
Thank you, Chairman. This is just points of information, if I may. It would appear to me that there's a large mature tree and also a telegraph pole in front of the premises. I don't know if this is correct, but if so, would they not need to be removed? And I'm also surprised to see that on page 13, in the second paragraph, the planning officer says at present the existing building is in a poor state of repair. Now, I can only see the building from the street, but from what I see in the street, it looks to be in an excellent state of repair. But what it's like inside, of course, I don't know. I haven't seen that. And again, I would like, on a point of information, to be told why is it considered to be in a poor state of repair. Thank you, Chairman.
Graham, can you answer that?
In terms of the telegraph pole and the tree, from what I understand, there's no intention of those having to be removed. But as I say, they are street furniture and a street tree, so that the applicant would need permission from Essex County Council to remove those. But I believe there was a tree protection, there was a tree survey and an arboricultural report that was put in. Our tree and landscape officer had no objection to that, and that would have included the street tree. But obviously the applicant doesn't have any right to just remove that tree. They would have to get permission for that anyway. But my understanding is it isn't required to be removed to enable the development. In terms of, sorry, where did you say? I hadn't picked up myself about the poor state of repair in the report. In fairness, I don't know where that's come from. I don't know whether that came from the submission or whether that's come from the case officer's own observations.
It may be something we're not going to be able to resolve tonight anyway, so... Okay. Can I ask members of the public, please, not to interrupt? I would, if necessary, clear the balcony, but I'm sure that won't be necessary. Councillor Hollywhip-Fred, would you like to speak?
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for allowing me to speak. I'm aware I'm not a member of the committee, but I am the ward councillor here and one of the 4 councillors who stood up to send this item to DDMC. And I've come this evening really to reiterate the reasons why I voted to object. And it was a very balanced debate and vote at Plans East. I believe it was actually a drawn vote. I know the officer said it was down for approval on the balance and on the officer's recommendation, but it was a drawn vote, and great concerns were raised at that committee. And if I'm honest, as a resident of Epping and listening to the residents of Crows Road, I continue to have those concerns in relation to the overdevelopment of the site. As the residents pointed out, this is double in size. It doesn't, in my eye, as someone who's lived in Epping for my whole life, it doesn't fit in with the street scene of Crows Road. You've got a very small bungalow next door, which I feel is completely overlooked by this development. And I think one of the points the residents raise, which is a relevant one, is obviously we see the glossy image, the glossy CGI, but this doesn't represent the reality of the street scene and the impact it will have on the street scene. Crows Road itself has been subject to quite significant development in recent years. Just past the bungalow, a new row of houses. So the street scene in Crows Road is really changing. And for me, this is another step for overdevelopment. And actually, one thing I would like clarity on from the officer in relation to the measurements, and obviously we take planners and professional advice on this, but can I please be assured that an officer actually went out and visited the site and took those measurements in person and didn't just rely on documentation supplied by the developer? In relation to the bats, there was a very lengthy conversation at Plans East, and as I said then, I am not an expert in bats, and as was also flagged, that is not necessarily the remit of planning committees. But what Councillor Phillip raised was where there had been enforcement when people hadn't sought their Natural England licence. However, I think there are very few examples of that, even though the officer did mention 2 in Wales. And what reassurances I did want at that time was that there would be checks and balances in relation to that, and was there any informative we could put in place to make sure that we took every step we could as a council, whether it be beyond this committee, to make sure the life of those bats, which are protected species, was protected. So just to conclude, and again, thank you for allowing me to speak this evening, I am opposed to this application. I believe it is overdevelopment and out of keeping with the street scene and will lead to overlooking, particularly from the bungalow next door. And I do hope members of the committee will consider that tonight. And as I say, the Plans East debate was very balanced. It was a drawn vote and real concerns were expressed at the time. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Williamson.
Thank you, Chair. I think the back question is covered under condition 13. As we've said, none of us are bat experts, but that seems to cover everything I think that is needed and covers the point that Councillor Whitbread and others have made. I just wanted one very, very small point of clarity. The obscured by condition on the site, the flank walls, I believe that condition goes over to any new householder on the sale. I think the condition is on the building, not with the owner. So I think if Mr. Courtney could confirm that, I think that clears that point up.
Yeah. Could you confirm, please?
Yes, certainly. Actually, in this particular instance, we've actually gone slightly further than that. Usually we would just put on a condition saying obscure glazing, and as you say, that would cover any replacement windows, because otherwise it would be a farce. You could put in an obscure glazed window, tick the box for that condition, and then straight away take it out and put in a clear glaze, and that wouldn't work. But actually, in this particular instance, we've also suggested condition number 5, which actually says no other windows will be put into the side elevation. Again, even with, because you can put in flank windows, even first and second floor flank windows without planning permission, they are subject to obscure glazing, but ground floor windows wouldn't be if they were put in under permitted development. So this is to remove that right. So actually, the windows they're proposing have to be obscured, have to stay obscured, and any new windows will need permission. In terms of bats, just quickly, I know you didn't ask me about the bats, but yeah, you were right, Councillor Williamson, on that. And I'll also point out for Councillor Whitbread's sake that there is also an informative suggested, I think it's number 18 on our list, which is obviously just highlighting the legal protection of the bats as well. I wouldn't necessarily say it's very difficult about putting on further conditions. Obviously, if it's outside of the planning regime, we shouldn't be conditioning it. It wouldn't meet the tests of a condition. Some may argue, well, it doesn't do any harm. They've got to do it anyway. And that could be the case. But, yeah, theoretically, we shouldn't be putting it on. But an informative is on there. And obviously, we do have our own conditions. And there would be a breach of condition if they don't comply with those. But in the grand scheme of things, there's much bigger prosecutions that would be had if they didn't, abide by what they're supposed to be abiding by.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Phillip.
Thank you, Chairman. And it's good to resume the debate with Councillor Whitbread from our time at Plans East. And it's quite nice not to necessarily just be focused around bats. I think we've, if you excuse the pun, done the bats to death at this point. It is clearly recognised within the report and within the conditions and the informative that there is legislation that covers it. We have heard the developer accept that he understands that. I would like to be the optimist and say the reason why there are so few cases of prosecutions on bats is because people know the law and they know people will report them if that happens. And so if it doesn't happen very often, there won't be very many prosecutions. I understand where Councillor Whitbread is coming from in terms of her objection, but like I said when we were at Plans East, I don't actually agree with her assessment of this one. I was also one of the councillors who stood up to said up here when we were tied at, I think it was 8-all. And it is definitely a balanced decision on this one. I don't believe, given what we've seen, that this could possibly be considered as overdevelopment in the context of planning law. Given the sizes, given the location, given the offsets from the boundaries, given the road that it's sitting in, I cannot see that would be a reasonable reason for refusal. I've looked at the other objections, I've read the emails. I still believe that this is something that falls on the right side of planning legislation, and so we should be approving it. I do note that the Town Council, who also look after Epping, for once haven't made an objection to this, and we have to give that some weight. I do obviously give my fellow colleague who represents the ward weight as well, but I think in balance, I cannot see reasons in this application that I would feel comfortable trying to say are good reasons for refusing. And if that's the case, then I have to come down on the side of approving it.
Thank you. Councillor Phillip. Yes. Yes, please. Yep. No, you're first, and then Councillor Whitehouse second.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I did briefly pay a visit to the site, and I do agree with Councillor Phillips that I don't believe that this would be an overdevelopment of the site. I did notice that there were considerable height differences between the rear elevation of the property and the rear of the garden, and I was a little bit worried about overlooking and loss of amenity to the two houses at the end of Bodley Close because of the height difference. So I just wondered if the officer could comment about that. I'm satisfied with the ridge heights, and also I'm very, very pleased that the distance between the border to number 36 is going to be increased, and so I'm happy about that. But it's just that overlooking element I was concerned about. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Courtney, can you enlighten us on that overlooking?
Sorry, just very quickly trying to do a rough a measurement using my pen, because obviously I haven't physically measured the distance, but it looks like, going by this plan, that from the first floor rear of the proposed houses, you're probably talking a little over 15 metres between the rear window and the shared boundary with the properties to the back, which is, I mean, Essex Design Guide compliant, to be honest. I mean, 15 metres we wouldn't particularly think would cause, or as obviously we wouldn't consider to cause any undue overlooking to those properties at the rear.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Whitehouse.
Thanks, Chairman. Yes, a couple of things I wanted to ask about. I mean, clearly it's a much bulkier building than the right places, which I happen to know reasonably well, because when I lived at 18 Crows Road, I had fairly unsuccessful piano lessons down there with the then minister's wife. The question is really whether it's bulky in the context of what's there existing. And clearly on one side you've got quite a bulky existing detached house, on the other side you've got a much smaller bungalow, which is also lower down the hill. I mean, I do regret, you know, as we see in lots of roads, I mean, the move away from garages and towards, you know, trying to fit on-plot parking means you end up with these extra wide crossovers and no fencing or hedging, which definitely does change the character of streets. We've seen that is in lots of places, but there's limited control we can have over that, because in general it's permitted development as long as they get permission from the Highways Authority for the crossover, which not everyone does. But I did want to ask two things. One is, obviously, levels are quite important because it will make a difference to the perception of bulk from neighbours as to where the floor level is. And you know, that's something which has been issues in other places as well. And I did want to ask if we were clear on, you know, what the relative floor levels were and whether that was part of the conditions. And although where it does go back, albeit single storey rather than double storey, is at the back. And I just wonder, there seems to be some sort of disagreement over how far it extends at the back beyond the existing properties. And I wondered if you could have some clarification on that as well, please.
So I'm just having a quick look, because I'm sure I saw a plan that showed the cross-section. I might be wrong, but I'm just having a quick look, which obviously would have showed the floor areas of each of those floors. But obviously, yeah, the case officer is fully aware that the topography of the site, we've obviously seen on here, the plans, the photographs, it's very clear that the site drops down to the rear, so that's all been taken into consideration. In terms of how far it goes back, I can only revert back to my previous answer. That was put to the case officer. She confirmed that she had taken measurements, she checked it, she was happy that those plans are accurate. I haven't gone any further than that, but I can just reiterate what she said.
Okay. Councillor Whitehouse, are you satisfied with that?
Looking again, I did see in report figures, which I now can't find, but yeah, I shall spend the next couple of minutes looking for them.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Heap.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, unlike Councillor Phillip, I am greatly cheered by concern over our West-Battalion residents. But I do think that the local councillor probably hit the nail on the head about it being overdevelopment. And I'm surprised, just as a comment, that anybody would wish to do this to a road. But I'm not sure that there is strong enough evidence to say we could turn it down and not win an appeal. But I won't support it.
Thank you very much.
Sorry, Chairman, I've just located and just put up there. I know I'd seen some cross-sections. There's a cross-section plan that's been submitted, which does show the relative floor heights, ceiling heights, everything else. Obviously, that will be one of the plans that's listed in the conditions that they've got to comply with.
Okay. Who's next? Williamson. Councillor Williamson.
Thank you for allowing me to come back, Chair. I watched Plans East. I've read all the reports and all the emails. I've been down Crows Road, and I fully understand the emotion that's in this room, and lots of planning applications have that much emotion. It affects people greatly. From my point of view, I would struggle to find a planning reason to object to this. I fully understand the emotion, but we have to turn this down if we do that on sound planning reasons. Otherwise, at any appeal, we look rather foolish. And I'm struggling to find a planning reason to refuse. Thank you.
Thank you. There was a time when we used to consider quite, as part of the discussion, do we think this is defendable on appeal? And I think that is possibly the problem here. Who we've got next? Councillor Kaufman.
Thank you, Chair. I do largely defer to my colleagues who know the site better. I do know the road. I have got some concerns about this and sort of some déjà vu. I don't like the way the plans are presented, the architectural plans. I think they do not really provide us the actual impact correctly. They are line drawings. I appreciate they're line drawings, but I don't like the presentation of this scheme to us to make a decision on. I am concerned about the veracity of some of the floors, the measurements. I do believe that the applicant believes they're correct, but I've seen some contradictory evidence that adjoining owners think they're completely wrong. And there are opportunities for mistakes, and we've had one case terribly recently in Buckhurst Hill where objectors were correct and the officers had got it wrong. And I'm worried about making a material planning decision when there is this much doubt, and I would like confidence that is not able to be given to me tonight that the objections are incorrect, that the floor areas, they're quite big discrepancies are being referred to. The big impact is I don't like the stylised image you've provided us. It's sort of Jack and Jill world. You've given us a picture with a very lovely looking pair of houses. I respect that. But the very nice tree in the front is missing. The horrible telegraph pole is missing. The walls are gone. The verges are not there. So in fact, you've got two cars for each house at odd angles that can't get in there because of the way the verges are, and the crossovers should be accurately represented to us because it's inaccurate what's being shown. And so I'm presuming you're proposing to take that tree away, for instance. You don't have to comment. So the street scene is going to change. I don't like the house that's there. And what other members have said, that's quite a nice scheme that's been prepared. But it's not actually quite reality. I'm worried about the floor, the dimensions, the impact on the street scene is a planning ground. Whether it's strong enough for me to object, I don't know. I'd much rather have the facts to deal with. And I don't believe that the discrepancies are too large. Someone's wrong, and I can't make that decision.
Right, thank you, Councillor Kaufman. Well, we're back to the same point that I asked Mr. Courtney earlier. It's been commented that the plans are wrong, and from what you've said, quite considerably wrong. Is the planning department happy with their assessment of the plans?
Well, as I said, the case officer certainly is. She's happy with the plans, but ultimately we're not making the decision. You are. So, I mean, obviously, the only way I wouldn't even want to say with any certainty that the plans are correct because I haven't taken measurements. I haven't done any of that. We've heard from the architect. I've heard from the webcast what the case officer said last time. The only way I would want to say with any certainty that the plans are correct is if I went down personally and measured it, or at least one of my officers went down and physically measured it. And at this stage, I can't say that that's been done.
Okay. All right. Councillor Whitehouse, would you like to come back on that? Is that...
Yeah, I'm sorry for coming back, but I found the section drawing which Ms. Courtney kindly put up earlier, and it wasn't quite my point. What that shows is the distance between the floors. What it doesn't show is the starting level, and obviously where you start has quite a big bearing onto where you finish at the top. And I just, if that's not, and I don't see it conditioned anywhere or on the plans, it just seems to me something we ought to make sure is covered.
Yeah, I agree. I haven't seen a condition either, but we do have a standard condition about land levels, and that requires obviously the existing land levels to be provided, so then we know what to work from, because it is, as you all know, it is a common issue we have, certainly with retrospective enforcement action when somebody's raised land levels and we don't know what the original land level was, so it makes it very difficult to enforce. So we do have a standard condition, and certainly that can be added if that is required.
I think Councillor Whitbread had something to add.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. And Chairman, I was here purely as an observer this evening, out of interest, but and listened very carefully to the debate that you've all been having, and thank you for allowing me to speak. My concerns are building on this application. I think on balance, you accept that when you've got an old detached house, that it can be redeveloped and things can change. But personally, if I was looking at this application on Plans East, I would have been thinking about how close it does come to the boundary of the bungalow, in particular with a single story. You know, this is double story against what's currently there. It is impactful, whichever way you look at it on balance, it's impactful. But what really concerns me this evening is what I've heard about the measurements and such, and picking up on Councillor Kaufman's points, which I think are very strong. How can you make a decision this evening without knowing that you actually have got accuracy? The planning officer has said that, presenting this evening, says that the planning officer who wrote the report will have done it, but can't be 100% certain. How can we make that decision this evening if we haven't got certainty? I am really worried by that, and I don't think the committee should be deciding this evening. I would personally, if I was sitting in your place this evening, I'd be seeking a deferral.
Not what we wanted, but any other councillors, please? Oh, yes.
Thank you, Chairman, and just really to reiterate the points of the other Councillor Whitbread, and I'm really uncomfortable from hearing that we do not have certainty, and I did ask that in my original point. We do not have certainty that an officer actually went out to the site and measured it, and that makes me very uncomfortable, because if we're relying on the architect is also the developer. And I think we need to, be transparent and open about that. So personally, I would also be calling for a deferral.
Thank you. Councillor Phillip.
Chairman, as you know, I'm a very strong supporter of our officers doing really good work on planning and making sure they have things accurate. However, Mr. Courtney's comment that he, as the presenting officer tonight, can't confirm that the dimensions are correct, I think we are left in no position to be able to make a decision tonight. We have to defer this for the officers to come back with confirmation that the measurements that they're proposing for this are 100% correct, because it does make a significant difference to the application. Taking Councillor Chris Whitbread's point there, I do think that we already have a distance between a two-storey house and the bungalows. That is probably a misleading part at the moment, but he is quite right. If we have doubt, and the officer did say very clearly that he was not willing to give us a 100% guarantee, I think we need to defer this and have make sure that the officer has a site visit. By all means, we have photographic evidence of those dimensions, and it comes back with somebody who can state categorically in front of the committee that the dimensions that we're approving are the correct ones. And as such, Chairman, I want to propose that we defer this decision until that evidence is presented.
Thank you. Councillor Brady wanted to speak. I'll ask her to speak first, and then we'll
yes.
see if we get a seconder.
It's a question to the planning officer. Yeah. I would have thought, again, it's something I don't know that much about. I would have thought when this house came on the market, it would have had all the dimensions of the property, of the land, and the house would be on the sale item. And so that evidence should be there. That should be there, should it not, in front of the planning officers and so on. They would go from that, not from the person who's wanting to develop it.
I will let Mr Courtney answer that, but I think the answer is probably not. From what I've seen of packages for property sales, you have hundreds of pages of things, and that is not what the planning department works.
Well,
I'll come back to you, Councillor.
Oh, sorry. There may be, and obviously anything like that helps. I don't. Again, from watching the webcast, I don't believe that the case officer just blindly accepted what's been submitted. She did do check. She did check it against our maps and ordnance survey maps and things like that. So it isn't just a case of going, oh, okay, the agent said it's fine. Obviously, we do have thousands of applications a year. We do generally have to trust that they are accurate, and they are. But I do agree. If there is doubt, then it is definitely preferable to actually go out and physically take measurements. I don't think that's been done in this case, and I think that you are right. It is sensible. My only I don't know if it's a suggestion, but my only comment will be, what I'd really like not to see is us defer, us go and do lots of measurements, us come back, and then there's a vote on a refusal that's actually completely irrelevant to what we've just done, and it's thrown out on overdevelopment and impact on the streets, something like that. That's the only thing. I have had that before. It is slightly frustrating that we've caused delay when actually we could have just refused it now for whatever that concern is. But obviously, if members don't feel they can make any decision without those measurements, I will agree. And sorry, Councillor, but just before one more, I trust my officers, and I do trust what's been said already. I personally wouldn't be asking for photographic evidence of the measurements themselves. I don't think we need a photograph of the tape measure, but I absolutely agree, as long as we've got that confirmation from the case officer that she has been on site, she has measured it, and she can show those measurements, and that can all be presented, and probably some photographs of the site would also be very useful, but I'm not going to necessarily ask her to take measurements, take photographs of the actual tape measure itself.
I certainly wouldn't be asking for that. It'd be very rare that our officers do make a mistake, but we must allow that it's possible. Yeah. Councillor Phillip, did you want to come back?
Chairman, yes, I just need to come back to Mr Courtney. I understand where he's coming from. However, the question around dimensions is critical to what we're deciding. And it may well have an impact on whether something's, for some councillors to think whether it's overdeveloped or not. Given the uncertainty at the moment, I could not find myself in a position where a positive vote for approval is possible. If I find myself in that position, then the only option is refusal, and in that case I'm fettered. I need to have the numbers to be confirmed to make sure we're right. I think it would be very dangerous to prejudge what the decision might be once we have those confirmed, because it depends very much on which of the two suggestions is right, whether what we're seeing from the planning officer is right or what we're seeing from the objector is right. Those make two very different decisions to make an assessment of, and I wouldn't want to do a hypothetical decision at this stage. So if I've got a seconder, I propose to
do we have a seconder for, yes, Councillor Bulcombe has seconded that. So the vote is that we defer for the planning department to recheck the measurements, the proportions. All those in favour of deferral?
(12), Chairman.
Against?
None, Chairman.
And abstentions?
2, Chairman.
Thank you. In which case, this matter will be deferred for the measurements to be rechecked. We go on to number 9, which is any other business. Oh, yes, Councillor Heap.
Thank you, Chairman. This is in relation to an item we heard at the last DDMC, which is Chimes Farms. I'm sure we've all had the email from the developer asking if he can resubmit without having to go to appeal, and I think that's probably a good thing, because quite a lot of the information that possibly we should have heard, we didn't hear. So I think it would be a good idea for the council to let him resubmit. That's it.
Thank you. I've nodded that particular application, and it isn't before me tonight. I haven't got the information on it.
Chairman, I don't think that's an appropriate piece of business for the DDMC to be looking at. There are processes and procedures for applications that have been refused at DDMC. And I know Councillor Heap and I were on different sides of that, but I do believe in protecting the green belt, and that was what drove that particular one. So there are procedures to do. we can trust our officers to follow those procedures.
I'm sure that's correct, and I would certainly trust all our officers for that. I do, however, support the idea that if developers can come back to us with a revised plan, that's better than going to appeal. Yes. Councillor Heath, you'd like to come back?
Sorry, I would just like to come back quickly. I do believe in protecting the green belt, but I also believe in decontaminating land that is possibly leaching into the River Lee and then into the Thames. So in the wider scope of it all, I thought it was a good scheme. That was it.
Right, thank you very much. In which case we have, I think, no reasons to exclude public and press.
None whatsoever, Chairman.
Thank you. In which case, before I close the meeting, can I say this is our last DDMC of the council calendar. I would like to thank all of the members for helping me over the year to make some good decisions and to deal with some quite difficult problems, and that's why they're sent up to DDMC. And I would also like to thank the officers for their assistance in making my job very much easier. And with that, I close the meeting at 9 minutes to 9.